Before we begin, let's do a Surah Al-Fatiha for Marhum Iraj Arab after Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. We are discussing the Day of Judgment. We're talking about the hisab, the account. And we said that in the tradition, Allama Majlisi brings that after he mentions the questioning, he has a narration where Allah asks, Akunta aliman, did you not know after our actions, God forbid, are bad? Did you perform these actions with knowledge, for example? Halla amilta, then why didn't you do it? Why didn't you fulfill your obligation? I ask you tonight, what would we do? It is the Day of Judgment, and when we are asked about our obligations, either towards God or towards people, what can we give an excuse to God who witnessed everything and who the witness is the same as the judge? So therefore we see that the stations of the Day of Judgment, the hisab, will be in detail. And there's many different types of relationship will be asked about our relationship with God, our relationship with people. But what I want to talk about tonight is that we might think that we have lots of good action because we're praying, say, throughout the day, 5 times a day at least. We're fasting, remembering God. And many people, they might think that, okay, I have good action. I shouldn't worry about the Day of Judgment as much. Because I'm a mu'min, I'm a believer, I'm doing good action. And as we have in the tradition, I'm going to share this tradition to wake us up, is that there's a very famous tradition that you've probably heard, that the Prophet mentions that a person that does subhanallah or adhkar, alhamdulillah, says these dhikr, it will be equal to planting a tree for themselves, for their own house in heaven. So the companions were wondering, because how many times do you think you've said subhanallah so far? Alhamdulillah, you can say it right now and plant yourself a tree. And they thought that, well, we have gardens and jungles, because all of these adhkar and remembrances will be recorded on the Day of Judgment. But then the Prophet cautions us that you have to be careful that you do not set them on fire. That a lot of times we plant things, we do lots of good action, but then God forbid we'll go to the Day of Judgment and we'll see there's nothing left. So we have sent it on fire. They call this hubutul a'mal. And I want you to remember the Arabic, because the same Arabic is used throughout the Holy Quran. Hubutul a'mal means the voidance or annulling of action, of good deeds. Good deeds that become pooch, become nothing. And this is because some actions are so bad, are so evil, they have ta'thir, they have effect on other actions. And they can set good actions that were accepted, that were done properly, but they can set it on fire. We also have on the good side, maybe we'll talk about it next week, inshallah, if there's life, takfir ul a'mal. Takfir here is actually not something bad. Like we always hear the word takfir, takfir. Here, takfir means to close or to erase the bad action. That there are good actions that will make up, that will protect you from the evil actions that you did. So which one is good? Takfir al-a'mal or hubut al-a'mal? Which one is the good one? Takfir al-a'mal. Hubut al-a'mal means that, habata means that thing comes down, descends, it gets voided. So our question is this: what voids other action? And what should it be so important for us to stay away so we can protect our prayer, we can protect our fasting, we can protect the goodness and kindness that we gave to others? The first verse that I'll share with you tonight is this, in 5:5. وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ. And whoever denies the faith, his work has been worthless. So what is the first one? What is the first cause of avoidance of good action, of good deeds? Disbelief. Iman, not having iman. Does this apply to everyone? You're saying that, okay, so everyone that's non-Muslim, all their acts of good actions are void? No, we're not saying that. Actually, a person that does good, he's going to be, or she will be guided to good. They'll be guided to Islam. Their heart will be open to Islam. This verse, when you say, وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ, whoever denies the faith, meaning it is for that group of people that know that Islam is true. That, for example, the most evident case is the case of the Prophet's time, where when Rasulullah, which is the greatest sign of God, came with the Holy Quran, with being as-sadiq al-amin, the trustworthy, the truth-telling. And with all that context, now he mentions to them that I am a Rasul, I'm a prophet, and then they deny, after knowing him for 40 years, after hearing verse of Quran in their own language, after seeing karama and miracles of the Holy Prophet, then they deny and fight against him. These are the one greatest examples or most clearest examples of this. So then if they, for example, the likes of the enemies of the Holy Prophet, when they denied him, and then they'll go and do some good here and there, it doesn't count. Because in reality, Allah looks at what? The intention. So if they don't believe in God, if they don't believe in God's Prophet, how can they expect a reward from God? Who's going to give the reward? Allah is. So they never made it for him. They never made that intention for him. They never accepted him. They went against God. They went against God's Rasul, his Prophet. What about those that don't have any information about Islam? Well, they are classified as being oppressed, intellectually oppressed. And on the Day of Judgment, they will be tested. The hujjah will be clear for them. The proof will be made clear for them, and they will be tested. If they believe in the truth, then of course there's heaven for them. Again, if they deny, then they'll be, into the hellfire. I mean, they can deserve. God can forgive whoever he wants. It's his kingdom. They can deserve. We say more precise is they can deserve the hellfire. Another verse is أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ وَلِقَائِهِ فَحَبِطَتْ أَعْمَالُهُمْ. Those are the ones who disbelieve in the verses of their Lord and their meeting with him. They disbelieved. They said there's no God. There's no signs, there's no verses, no signs of God. They disbelieved in the meeting of God, so their deeds have become worthless, showing that one of the conditions for actions to be accepted is iman, faith, and not rejecting the truth. So this is a big wake-up call for us, meaning that the first step, if I want to be very cautious, if I want to be caring for myself, I will make sure that the number one condition of actions being accepted is protected my iman. Dear brothers, dear sisters, a lot of times we come to faith and it either happens in different ways, we don't know, maybe through our parents, or maybe our parents weren't religious, through our friends, or through investigation. But now we're religious and Allah has opened our hearts to Islam. then we take it for granted that, okay, I already know the truth. I'm not going to be ever, misguided ever. And I can do whatever I want because now I believe. It's so obvious. Look at the disbelievers. It's so obvious God exists. So obvious Quran is a miracle. Why aren't they believing? But then I become a little bit arrogant and I become less cautious. I forget that I live in a society, a time period that is very easily for my faith to be tested. And I don't care about my actions, and I don't have that humbleness, and I'm not appreciative of my faith as how I should be, then God forbid, God takes away my iman. And then one day I wake up and I start questioning, and I say, well, maybe the imams, okay, maybe now the prophet, okay, maybe God. And I read whatever book I want to read. I just hang out with whoever I want to hang out with. And at the end of the day, what happens? God takes away that ni'mah from me. So when you look at the Quran, you see that guidance is from Allah, from verses of Quran. Guidance is from God. But God has criterion for this guidance. I was actually looking and searching. One of the milak, or one of the criteria, or criterion of faith, is not oppressing others. I looked at this verse about 10 times. You can look at it right here. Take a picture of it. 10 verses of Quran, proof that La yahdi al-qawm al-zalimin. Surah Al-Baqarah. La yahdi al-qawm al-zalimin. God does not guide the group of people that sin. La yahdi al-qawm al-zalimin. Again, Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah Al-An'am, Surah Al-Tawbah, Surah Al-Tawbah. All the way, these 10 verses, La yahdi al-qawm al-zalimin. Those that do dhulm, those that oppress, or those that do sin, God doesn't guide them anymore. So if I am not careful of my actions, and I want to eat whatever I want to eat, look at whatever I want to look at, na'udhu billah, hear whatever I want to hear, I'm not careful, then that heart will reject Islam. Some of our marajid taqleed in Qum, not in Los Angeles area, in Qum, would ask the 14 infallibles, beg them, attach themselves to the 14 ma'asumeen, that when I leave my house, I'm leaving as a mu'min. When I come back, bring me back as a mu'min. But we are careless. We see whatever we want, hang out with whoever we want to, and not worrying about the fact that what would happen if God took away, we sinned and God took away our iman. The tradition mentions one of the first things that God takes away from the sinner is that wilayat of Ahlul Bayt. Then they sin more. Then he takes away that rasalat, messengership, believing in prophets. Then he sends more, and God takes away belief in himself. And this relates to the time period we're in now. And you see, a group of people, individuals, oppress the Palestinians, that for 75 years they're being oppressed. Well, one answer that we give in our own minds is, well, the first person they are harming isn't necessarily the Palestinians, they're harming themselves. Because God does not guide those group of people that do dhulm. God doesn't guide them. And I want to mention, actually, there's a beautiful tradition from Prophet Isa alayhi salam, that God says, from Imam Ali narrates that Isa alayhi salam, we have a lot of traditions from Jesus, from Ahlul Bayt. And if we didn't have Ahlul Bayt, we wouldn't have these traditions shared from, because they might not be in the Bible and other Christian sources. So actually there's a rich abundance of knowledge from Isa alayhi salam and his life from Ahlul Bayt. So in this tradition, Imam Ali alayhi salam mentions that Isa alayhi salam was commanded to tell Bani Israel, because obviously the dhulm that they were doing, especially during the time of Isa alayhi salam, that I will not answer your prayers. I will not answer your prayers. So someone that does dhulm, hurts, harms others, one of the things that happens is he will not become guided. He will not come into God's belief and following God, and they're harming themselves. So this is the first thing that we have to be the most careful, is protecting our iman, not taking it for granted. We want to go in a fast pace. What do you think is the second thing that voids other actions? The first is iman, and iman is an action. Alhamdulillah, we had at the masjid, last week, a person came and do shahadatain. And I mentioned to them that, this is the best action that you're doing. Because iman and faith is an action. You choose to become Muslim. The second is disrespect to the Prophet, according to Quran. Disrespecting the Prophet causes hubutul a'mal, our actions to be void. Look at this verse. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي ولا تجهروا له بالقول كجهر بعضكم لبعض أن تحبط أعمالكم. So, O you who have believed, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet or be loud to him in speech, like the loudness of some of you to others, lest your deeds become worthless. You are rude to the Prophet, you speak in front of him very loudly, you don't have the correct mannerisms. Quran is saying your voids are done. Are your actions, your good deeds are worthless. And this also applies to the nafs of Rasulullah, Imam Ali alayhi salam, and Ahlul Bayt. That if somebody disrespects them, somebody, God forbid, in a way dishonors them, somebody has hatred of Ali, some Shia Sunnis say, hatred of Ali is nifaq, is hypocrisy. Where's the place of, it's an interesting hadith from Ahmad ibn Hanbal, that they ask him once, and they're surprised, they say, is it true that Ali alayhi salam is Qasimun Nar wal Jannah, the separator of heaven and hell? And he mentions, do you believe obviously in this hadith that the believer, La yuhibbuka illa al-mu'min, that whoever loves, nobody loves Ali alayhi salam unless he is a believer, and nobody hates him, that unless he is a hypocrite. Says, you believe in this? He asked the person. Says, yes. Everyone, this is tradition, everyone accepts. So I ask, where does the believer go? He said he goes to heaven. Where does the hypocrite go? Hell. So then Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Sunni scholar, says then Ali is the Qasimun Nar wal Jannah, because his love is equal to belief in heaven, and his hatred is equal to hypocrisy. The third thing that causes action, and this is more relative to us, is al-ujbu yufsidul amal. Ujb. Who here, you can raise your hands, this term al-ujb. Who knows what it means? Al-ujb. Sorry? Yes, there's a little difference. Those that know the answers don't become muta'ajjib, don't become proud. But it means to be proud of yourself. And our teacher would say, for example, you do Salatul Layl, you wake up next morning, you're like, look at me, Allah has one, blessed believer, worshiper, that when everyone was asleep in Los Angeles area, I was awake for hours and worshiping and crying. He doesn't have, someone like me. That's called ujb. And it says, al-ujb yufsidul amal. Just thinking that you are, satisfied with yourself. Or some define ujb in the hadith it has that you don't look at the good at others. You're so arrogant, that you're so prideful, that whatever someone else does, you don't see it. You only see yourself. How sister said too, kibr means that you think you are better than someone else. Ujb is in relation to others. You could just say ujb means I am happy, I'm proud of myself. Muta'ajjib. There's an interesting story about Sheikh Abbas al-Qumi, how some of our scholars were so careful about this. He was praying one of the salats, and maybe you've heard this when somebody is late. They say, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. And then the Imam of Jama'ah waits. Either if he's in ruku, he'll say, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. He keeps doing it until they reach. So this time when he heard Ya Allah, Ya Allah, it was a very faint voice from far, meaning that the row are so far he could barely hear him. And then he says, you know what, I'm not going to pray the second prayer anymore. And they said, why? He said, when I heard that Ya Allah from far, I thought, wow, what a big prayer. Look how many followers I have, for example. How many people are following me. I became happy about myself. I became proudful. I don't want to lead the other prayer. Now, the ulama that we had this much diqqat. Today, show me one person that you've heard, for example, do this. I don't want to pray the second, because I don't want to have pride. Because they were daqiq. They were, very exact. A person by the name of Abu Ja'far Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Nasr al-Bazanti lived in 152-221. One of the early scholars in Kufa, companions of Imam Kadhim, Imam Rida, Imam Jawad, and one of the Ashabul Ijma, people that, they all accept his narrations. He says that, narrated that once Imam Rida alayhi salam sent a ride for me so that I can visit him in the village of Sirriya. Once I arrived, I entered upon the Imam and stayed there until dark. So Bazanti is invited by who? By the 8th Imam. What a pleasure to have Imam Rida alayhi salam send for you to come to his house to see him privately. Great honor. I stayed to his house until dark. When the Imam wanted to stand up, he said, I do not think you can return to Medina at this time of night. I said, yes, may my life be sacrificed for you. That is true. You obviously want to stay at Imam Rida's house. Yes, it's true. So what happened to Bazanti? The Imam said, you can stay with us tonight and return tomorrow. He says, I am obedient to your order. The Imam asked his servant to place the Imam's personal bed, blanket, and pillow for me, he says. The Imam's own bed, was laid out, and now it's for, Bazanti to stay there. And allowed me to sleep. I thought perhaps no one of the companions had been blessed as such. Nobody, Imam Rida, some sense for him. I came to him. I stayed with him. What an enjoyable night with the Imam, asking probably questions, learning from the Imam, getting guidance from him. And then the Imam asking to stay. So the own bed, blanket, the Imam goes and sleeps somewhere else. And I was sitting and pondering my thoughts. Then the Imam comes back. Imam Rida comes back to Bazanti and says this. When Sa'sa'a ibn Suhan was among the companions of my grandfather, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, Sa'sa'a was ill. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahu. Imam Ali came to visit him. So Imam Rida now is telling Bazanti, a similar thing happened to Sa'sa'a. And Imam Ali alayhi salam came to visit him. And he came and told him that I had a religious responsibility which I completed. I had a religious responsibility which I completed. Do not place this as your merit, rather look at your actions and see how they are. My coming beside your bed and visiting you is not an act of saving you. Attend to your actions, for they will look into your actions on the day of judgment. That Imam Ali alayhi salam is telling Sa'sa the fact that I came to visit you, don't have ujb. Don't have that pride. And Ali alayhi salam to come visit. That is my religious duty. You're sick, I'm coming to see you. And Imam Rida read the mind of Bazanti and told him the story of Sa'sa in a very respectful way. Just said the story. When you Farsi have this expression, that you tell it to the door so the wall can hear, for example. So he told to Bazanti the story of Sa'sa, so he would not have ujb. Why? Because Imam Rida is thinking of his guidance. He doesn't want Bazanti for him to let his guards loose, to be off guard. And now that from the rest of his life that Imam Rida, visited me, I stayed, at Imam Rida invited me, then from now on I'm going to heaven. I don't need to try anymore. I'm going to heaven no matter what because the Imam loves me so much and he treated me better than any other companion. So the Imams were, side note, were very careful of what remedy and prescription to give to the believers. And this ujb was so dangerous that the Imam has to tell, or Imam Ali has to tell them, look, I was nice to you, kind to you, but don't allow this for you to become prideful. Be humble. Great lessons that we have from the Imam. The last thing that we're going to talk about tonight that causes hubult is dhulm, and oppression, harming others. Do you remember the tradition I shared about the person that is muflis? The Prophet said, who is muflis? Anybody know what muflis means? Probably I've said it a few times. Muflis means that you're bankrupt, you don't have anything. And the Prophet talks about a group of people on the day of judgment, they will be muflis. They have salat, they prayed, they fasted. They'll come to the day of judgment and they don't have anything. And they say, why? Because you mistreated people, so therefore we gave your salat to him. We gave your fasting to him. So these are prayers that are accepted. These are salats that are accepted. It went all the way to the day of judgment. If it wasn't accepted, it wouldn't ascend all the way there. Immediately they would reject it. Accepted prayer, accepted fast, because of mistreating others, it goes and disappears or goes to the other person. Verse of Quran. من أجل ذلك كتبنا على بني إسرائيل أنه من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا. Because of what we decreed upon the children of Israel, this is 5:32 of Quran, that whoever kills a soul, for a soul, unless for a soul, or for corruption in the land, is as if they have slain all of mankind in its entirety. I want you to think of all the different religious or non-religious texts that you've read about the value of human life and how sacred human life is. And compare it with this verse of Quran 5:32, that Quran equates killing one as if you're killing all of humanity. I don't think you'll find any text, that will say killing one is equal to, for example, how many people we have? 6 billion, 7, 8 billion. Killing 6 billion people, 8 billion. So therefore, you see that one of the verses of Quran, and this is also about Bani Israel, is that killing, obviously, is one of the worst of sins. Harming is the worst of sins. And today we are in a time period where we see obvious dhulm happening to a group of people that for 75 years have been under occupation, living in a time period called the Gaza Strip. Very tiny period, tiny land area. 2.2 million people are living there. Possibly half of them are children. And now they're saying that there's going to be a siege, and they're actually, covered in a way, trapped the people inside. They're already trapped, but now allowing water, not allowing fuel in for power. And obviously children are going to be starving, bombarding them, dhulm happening. So we see that some people ask this question then why does God allow such actions? And when you talk about dhulm, why does God allow a group of people to have so much power and to oppress others? That's how there's oppression all over the world. Why does God allow this? Why doesn't, when the first child or baby is starved or killed, why doesn't God, for example, remove that oppression from them? And the Quran answers this beautifully by mentioning that وَلَا يَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَأَنَّمَا نُمْلِي لَهُمْ خَيْرًا لِأَنفُسِهِمْ إِنَّمَا نُمْلِي لَهُمْ يَزْدَادُ إِثْمًا. That benefit that you see that those that disbelieved had, don't think that it is khair or good for them. That actually we are giving them a time period, we're giving them muhla, or they call this imhal. We're giving them a chance so they can increase in sin. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. So there is more punishment. A person that is short-lived and is oppressor, which one is worse, a short-lived oppressor or an oppressor that lives a long time? The one that is short-lived, for example. At that time, you'll see when someone is short-lived, the oppression is less. But when someone is long-lived, they'll oppress more, and they wish on the day of judgment that they had it earlier, that either the government would be changed or that they would die earlier. So giving imhal, allowing the oppressors to have more of a chance to oppress, actually works against them. So what can we do? And this is the last thing we'll end tonight, is what can we do for our the Muslims and those that are oppressed, whatever religion they have. It's not an issue of Islam or non-Islam. Those that are oppressed in Palestine, what can we do for them? The first thing that came to my mind is to cause awareness, to educate, first ourselves. There's a lot of background, there's a lot of history, and people, if they don't understand this topic well, because of the media, and obviously they're on the side that is against Palestine, they're going to stretch the truth. They're going to talk about things that are not true. You're going to hear fake news. So educate yourself. I remember when the Gulf War happened and I was young, there's only two sources of news, CNN and BBC, whatever, international. Whatever that happened in Iraq at that time, you would have to learn in English from these two sources. Social media with all the disadvantages and harms that it has, one benefit that it has is that it allows people to post and share things and to be able to educate one another and have a dialogue with one another, to share videos of the truth of what's going on. And therefore, every cell phone can become a camera and to show people, look, this is dhulm, this is oppression, and instead of just relying on CNN or BBC or major news outlets. So the first thing is educating ourselves, being able to share and post or to repost or to put on stories what's going on, because a lot of people, they really don't know. Don't look at here in our communities that everyone just already knows what's been going on for years. Many people, they don't. So the first thing is awareness and education. And also to ourselves that you don't buy into the fake news, because there's always a political agenda when they give news. The second thing is dua, praying. And some of the centers, I have news that they're having a dua night for the Palestinians. And they mentioned the hadith that one of the salah and weapons of the prophets is dua. One of the weapons, and we read them dua kumail. The weapons is tears, or in the hadith we have, for example, the weapons are dua. Dua is effective. Praying together and praying for oppression, those that are being oppressed, for their faraj happening, the removal of oppression happening. Third is there are institutions that can help children in Palestine. They can help give money to them and helping them out, helping and giving charity to those that are starving, those that are under oppression. And the fourth that I want to mention, and there's other things to do, is not losing hope. A lot of times when we see this earthquake in Afghanistan, for example, thousands killed, or you see, dhulm and oppression happen here in the U.S. You see other countries, for example, it happened. It causes a believer one time to say, what's going on? We're always going to be harmed. We're always going to be oppressed. Know that the belief in Mahdawiyat, the belief in Imam Zaman, the belief in Imam Mahdi, it gives us sheer hope. Because we believe that at the end, the aqibah is with the muttaqeen, the end, the good end is with the believers. The righteous will inherit the earth. And there will be a time where there will be no injustice. Some of the traditions even talk about this type of dhulm, waking someone up abruptly. Imagine, I don't know if anyone was ever asleep here and their child jumps on them or wakes them up. It's a type of dhulm. Just waking, they get scared. Even that type of dhulm, it says in the tradition, won't exist during the government of Imam Mahdi. That amount, which is, we don't really call it oppression, that type of discomfort doesn't exist. Security will exist for all. People will be able to travel all throughout the world, not worrying about anything. Everyone, there will be the removal of poverty and starvation. And there'll be so many benefits in knowledge and worship. But what is important for us is to make dua for the Imam of the age. And we said these things cause awareness, educate ourselves, make dua, help in charity, and always remain hopeful no matter what happens. Make dua for Allah to help all of the oppressed throughout the world, especially our dear brothers in Palestine, to help the earthquake victims, inshallah, in Afghanistan, and to help all of us, the youth, in our endeavors and keeping our faith strong, inshallah, in the US and throughout the world, and to forgive our sins and to not make void our sins, and to give us good amal salih in the hereafter, to give us knowledge and taqwa and piety, and to cure the sick, feed the poor, and have rahmah and mercy upon the deceased, inshallah, to expedite the faraj of the Imam of the age.